conservation and restoration of mountain, river, forest, farmland, lake, grassland, and desert ecosystems are bringing back lucid waters, lush mountains, blue sky, and white clouds.
像保护眼睛一样保护自然和生态环境。这个理念在中国深入人心。在这里，曾经灭绝的麋鹿不但恢复了种群数量，还被成批野化放归大自然。
Thanks to the unremitting efforts by China, many extinct or endangered wild species are regaining confidence and dignity. The elevation of Yunnan varies from 70 meters to 6,700 meters. It's a kingdom of animals and plants. People's efforts to protect biological diversity is speeding up at the moment. China is taking...
尊敬的各位部长、各位代表，欢迎回到高级别会议全体会议。接下来我们将继续按照发言顺序进行发言，并且听取收到的视频发言。首先，我请澳大利亚环境和水资源部部长谭亚·普利贝斯阁下发言。之后呢是苏丹。首先有请普利贝斯部长阁下，有请。
Sorry, was that? So microphone two. Oh yeah, that's red.
Okay.
That's red. Yeah.
澳大利亚部长准备好就可以开始了。
Thank you very much. As is our custom in Australia, I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the traditional owners of the area of Montreal, all First Nations people who are represented at this conference, and in particular I pay my respects to Australia's First Nations people who have managed our land and sea country for over 65,000 years. As Australians, we know how lucky we are with an island continent to call our home and some of the most spectacular biodiversity on Earth. We also recognise our responsibility as a megadiverse nation with an abundance of plants and animals found only in Australia to play a leading role at this historic meeting and in the agreements that will be forged here in Montreal. We understand the stakes at this conference and we share its driving vision, a world that is net zero and nature positive. A world that is winning the fight against climate change on a path to net zero carbon pollution, while living in harmony with the natural resources that sustain us all. Australia has made substantial changes in the last 6 months. One of our first acts as a new government was to lift Australia's climate ambition, setting higher targets for emissions reductions by 2030 with a clear path to net zero by 2050. Australia is working with the private sector to design out waste and pollution, keeping materials in use and fostering markets to achieve a circular economy by 2030. Just last week, we announced our new Nature Positive Plan for Australia to protect our biodiversity, to stop new extinctions and to reverse the damage that's already been done. As part of this plan, we will establish a new Environment Protection Agency. We will protect 30% of our land and 30% of our sea by 2030. We'll design a new nature repair market to encourage private investment in conservation, protection and restoration. We will reform our national environment laws from the ground up, taking them from nature negative, where they were simply managing a decline in our environment, to nature positive, where we'll protect our land and sea and leave it in a better state than we found it. Transforming Australia from nature negative to nature positive, that's what we're seeking to do. To turn the tide in our country from over 2 centuries of the destruction of nature to a future of nature repair. But we know, of course, that no single nation can do this alone. That's why global agreements and conferences like this are so important. It's why clear targets and strong goals and mutual support are also so vital. Australia stands ready to lift our ambition, to support our friends and partners, particularly in the Pacific, and to face the most critical challenges facing humanity today. Can I finish by thanking the People's Republic of China for your leadership and Canada for your hospitality at this 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Thank you.
谢谢部长阁下的发言。下面我请苏丹大使塔吉哈桑·阿布萨利赫阁下发言。在苏丹之后是格林纳达。阿布萨利赫大使阁下，有请。
شكرا السيد الرئيس رئيس مؤتمر الأطراف الخامس عشر لاتفاقية التنوع البيولوجي، السادة الوزراء، السادة رؤساء الوفود، الحضور الكريم، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يطيب لي في البدء باسم حكومة جمهورية السودان أن أتقدم لجمهورية الصين الشعبية بالتهنئة لرئاسة هذا المؤتمر المهم، كما أزجي خالص الشكر لحكومة كندا لاستضافتها لهذا الاجتماع. وأشكر أيضا سكرتارية اتفاقية التنوع البيولوجي على ما بذلته من جهد مقدر في إعداد كل الوثائق المتعلقة بالمؤتمر. السيد الرئيس، يعد فقدان التنوع البيولوجي تحديا للبشرية، الأمر الذي يتطلب بذل جهود أكبر لمعالجة الدوافع المباشرة وغير المباشرة لفقدان التنوع البيولوجي بطريقة أكثر تكاملاً، واتخاذ إجراءات عاجلة لمعالجة محركات فقدان التنوع البيولوجي، وكذلك محركات تغير المناخ وتدهور الأراضي، مع دعوتنا لتقديم الموارد اللازمة للبلدان النامية من أجل معالجة هذه التغيرات. نؤكد حرصاً على التعاون التام كطرف في الاتفاقية نحو احتمال الإطار العالمي للتنوع البيولوجي، وهو يمثل فرصتنا لتوفير كوكب صحي ومستدام لجعل المستقبل وجميع أشكال التنوع البيولوجي على الأرض. السيد الرئيس، إن عدم وجود وسائل التنفيذ الكافية ما زالت تمثل العقبة المستمرة لتنفيذ الاتفاقية والخطة الاستراتيجية من قبل الأطراف من البلدان النامية، وبالتالي يسلط الضوء على الحاجة لتعزيز التعاون الدولي لتنفيذ الإطار العالمي للتنوع البيولوجي على المستوى الوطني، حيث أن مدى التنفيذ الفعال للأطراف من البلدان النامية لالتزاماتها بموجب الاتفاقية يعتمد على التنفيذ الفعال للأطراف من الدول المتقدمة لالتزاماتها بموجب هذه الاتفاقية فيما يتعلق بالموارد المالية ونقل التكنولوجيا والمعارف. عليه يجب زيادة التمويل المتعلق بالحفاظ على التنوع البيولوجي وتوجيه هذا الدعم للبلدان النامية، وفي الوقت المناسب لتمكينها من التنفيذ الكامل للإطار العالمي للتنوع البيولوجي من أجل تحقيق رؤية عام 2050 العيش في وئام مع الطبيعة. إن أراضينا هي موئل للتنوع البيولوجي، ونحن ملتزمون بالمضي قدما بأهداف التنمية المستدامة، مع الحاجة إلى دعم مستدام يمكننا من بلوغ أهداف الاتفاقية المتمثلة في الحفاظ على التنوع البيولوجي واستخدامه المستدام، وتقاسم المنافع الناشئة عن استخدام الموارد الوراثية بطريقة منصفة وعادلة. فلا بد من تخصيص موارد تمويل التنوع البيولوجي من أجل ترجمة حشد الموارد على الأرض الواقع. كما نتطلع لتيسير المشاركة الكامل والفعال للبلدان النامية في اجتماعات مؤتمر الأطراف والاجتماعات بين الدورات. السيد الرئيس، يشكل استخدام الموارد الجينية استخداما للتنوع البيولوجي. ينبغي الالتزام بتقاسم المنافع الناشئة من استخدام معلومات التسلسل الرقمي الموارد الجينية بشكل عادل ومنصف لدعم أهداف اتفاقية التنوع البيولوجي، وبالتالي تحقيق التنمية المستدامة. كما ينبغي اتخاذ إجراءات لجعل البلدان قادرة على الحصول على والاستفادة من استخدامات معلومات التسلسل الرقمي من خلال تعميم معلومات التسلسل الرقمي في بناء القدرات كجزء من تقاسم المنافع وفي حشد الموارد. تعتبر معلومات التسلسل الرقمي في نفسها أداة مهمة لتعبئة الموارد، لذا فإن معلومات التسلسل الرقمي تعتبر عنصر مهم في الإطار العالمي للتنوع البيولوجي. ختاما، نطمح في اعتماد الإطار العالمي للتنوع البيولوجي وكل ما يتعلق بمشاريع المقررات بمختلف الجوانب الخاصة بالتنوع البيولوجي. إن توفر الإرادة السياسية وإبداع روح التعاون والمرونة تمكننا من وضع الحلول المناسبة واتخاذ كل التدابير اللازمة لتغليب وجهات النظر. فبتضافر الجهود يمكننا الوصول إلى غايات مؤتمر الأطراف بنجاح. أشكركم جميعا للإصغاء.
谢谢大使阁下的发言。下边我邀请格林纳达气候复原力、环境和可再生资源部顾问乔伊斯·托马斯女士发言。在格林纳达之后是南非。托马斯女士，有请。
Okay, so. Thank you, Mr. President. Executive Secretary, Grenada wishes to thank the government of the People's Republic of China and the Canadian government for facilitating our participation and the Secretariat for their hard work. Distinguished delegates, Grenada is firmly focused on implementation. To this end, we have 4 key points to share. First, the vulnerabilities of small island developing states require not only special but urgent attention from the world community. Grenada calls for review and strengthening of the program of work on island biodiversity that focuses on addressing and supporting implementation of the work program for seeds in the GBF. Secondly, implementation requires access to resources. We must address the need to provide adequate and predictable means of implementation, including mobilization of new and additional financial resources, and in accordance with Article 20. Grenada recognizes the important fiduciary role of the GEF and calls for an increase in resources to GEF, including from new sources and innovative mechanisms. Grenada believes funding for capacity building should not be prescriptive, and countries should be allowed to apply those funds in a way that best addresses their needs, including for institutional capacity strengthening to access financing. The value of needs assessment and national resources is also recognized. Thirdly, any benefits arising from the use of DSI on genetic resources must be shared in a fair and equitable way. Grenada does not consider open access to mean free access to DSI. Technology transfer, capacity building, and scientific cooperation must be jointly addressed, and new resource mobilization must be an integral part of the solution on DSI, on genetic resources. We support recognition and inclusion of rights of IPLCs to derive benefits on genetic resources associated with traditional knowledge. Fourth, Grenada is concerned about the adverse impacts to our precious island biodiversity, including our spices, brought on by rapid developments in biotechnology, including the use and release of synthetic biology organisms, components, and products. For us, regular horizon scanning, assessment, and a monitoring process are key. Grenada urges all parties to acknowledge already agreed obligations on synthetic biology and to support inclusion of relevant language under Target 17 of the GBF. Finally, it is our common but differentiated responsibility to safeguard the natural world and to ensure the future of humanity. Thank you.
谢谢您的发言。现在我邀请南非环境、林业和渔业部总干事诺姆芬多特萨巴拉拉女士发言，在南非之后将是巴林。有请南非。
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, South Africa joins others in thanking the People's Republic of China and the Government of Canada for hosting the 15th Conference of Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity. Let me begin my statement with a quote from our iconic late President Nelson Mandela. I quote, "Africa's rich natural landscape is unlike any other in the world. The right to a healthy environment is a crucial human right because it directly impacts our quality of life. Often, it is the most vulnerable that suffers most in the face of environmental abuse." South Africa, as a mega-diverse country, together with other developing countries, carries the apportioned burden in implementing the convention. It is for this reason that South Africa would like to reiterate the importance of the following. Firstly, the adoption of the ambitious global biodiversity framework that balances the three objectives of the convention with commensurate means of implementation, which must cover all aspects of the convention and its protocol. Secondly, the establishment of a dedicated global diversity fund as a financial mechanism to provide predictable, adequate, and timely flows of funds to developing countries to support the full implementation of the global biodiversity framework, and this is critical. Thirdly, furthermore, South Africa calls for the reform of multilateral development banks and the international financial institution to align and scale up funding to developing countries in order to ensure simplified access and mobilize biodiversity financing from various sources. Fourthly, we support an ambitious global target on area-based conservation, also referred to as 30 by 30. This expansion should address all ecosystems, including terrestrial, marine, coastal, inland waters. The financing allocated towards the expansion of conservation estate must also enhance effective and equitable governance as well as management of both existing and additional conservation areas. We call for consideration of priorities, circumstances, and capacity building of developing countries, as well as recognition of the rights of indigenous people. We also agree that the post-20 GBF should include a solution for the DSI. Mr. President, you will be pleased to hear that South Africa's policies are closely aligned to objectives of the Convention of Biological Diversity and is therefore positioned to respond to the implementation of the GBF. In closing, South Africa reiterates its support to secure a new deal for people and nature. I thank you.
谢谢您的发言。我现在邀请巴林生物多样性局代理局长努夫阿里阿尔瓦斯米女士发言。在巴林之后将是以色列。巴林有请。
أصحاب المعالي والسعادة الحضور الكريم، في بادئ الأمر يطيب لي أن أتقدم لكم سيدي الرئيس ولجمهورية الصين الشعبية ودولة كندا والأمانة العامة لسكرتارية الاتفاقية بجزيل الشكر وعظيم الامتنان نظير الجهود القيمة التي بذلت لتنظيم هذا الاجتماع الدولي المهم. وإنه لمن دواعي سروري البالغ أن يكون في هذا اليوم بين أخواني، وأن أرحب بكم جميعاً للمضي قدماً في دعم الجهود الرامية إلى مزيد من تكاتف الجهود الدولية نحو تحقيق رؤى مشتركة للعيش في انسجام مع الطبيعة لضمان استدامة مورد كوكبنا لأجيالنا القادمة. سيدي الرئيس، إن هذا الاجتماع يأتي برؤى طموحة نحو مستقبل واعد لبيئتنا رغم كل التحديات والأرقام المخيفة المرتبطة بتدهور الموائل والأراضي. فبالعودة إلى تقييم المنبر الحكومي الدولي للعلوم والسياسات في مجال التنوع الحيوي وخدمات النظم الإيكولوجية منه والذي أظهر أن سبل عيش 3.2 مليار شخص تتأثر بتدهور الأراضي، منهم 1.3 مليار شخص محاصر في ظروف غير آمنة غذائياً، الأمر الذي لعب دوراً في تشكيل أزمات التنوع الحيوي الذي نشهدها اليوم. كما يشير تقرير الكوكب الحي لعام 2020 الذي نشره الصندوق العالمي للطبيعة أنه بين عام 1970 و2016 حدث انخفاض تقريبي بنسبة 68% في الأعداد الخاضعة للمراقبة لكل من الثدييات والطيور والزواحف والأسماك والبرمائيات. الحضور الكريم، إن هذا الوضع الذي نعيشه اليوم يحتم علينا جميعاً العمل بيد واحدة وبآلية واضحة وبنسق متناغم بين جميع الدول للحد من الآثار السلبية التي تهدد التنوع الحيوي على كوكب الأرض. ومن هذا المنطلق فقد سعت مملكة البحرين إلى تبني حزمة من المبادرات والخطط الوطنية الطموحة والرامية إلى تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة، ولا سيما تلك المرتبطة بحماية مظاهر التنوع الحيوي والحد من الآثار السلبية لتغير المناخ. ومنها على سبيل المثال لا الحصر أطلقت مملكة البحرين خطة وطنية طموحة لمضاعفة أعداد الأشجار في المملكة لقرابة 3.6 مليون شجرة بحلول عام 2035، وذلك بتبني أساليب زراعية مستدامة واختيار أنواع نباتية قادرة على التكيف في المناخ الصحراوي. كما يتم أيضاً في الوقت الراهن العمل على مضاعفة أشجار القرم إلى 4 أضعاف بحلول 2035، حيث تم إنشاء عدد من مشاتل القرم بسعة استيعابية تصل إلى 1,000,000 شتلة. أيضاً أعلنت مملكة البحرين مؤخراً واحدة من أكبر المحميات الطبيعية البحرية في المنطقة بمساحة إجمالية تقدر 1330 كيلو متر مربع، وهو الأمر الذي يتناقم مع أهداف آيش ذات الصلة. سيدي الرئيس، الحضور الكريم، إلى جانب الجهود الوطنية سالفة الذكر، فإني أود أن لا أفوت الفرصة لأشيد بالمبادرات الإقليمية في منطقة الشرق الأوسط التي تجسد روح التعاون نحو مستقبل أفضل للمنطقة. وعلى رأس هذه المبادرات مبادرة الشرق الأوسط الأخضر التي أطلقتها شقيقة المملكة العربية السعودية، والتي تهدف بشكل مباشر إلى زراعة 50 مليار شجرة. وتحالف القرم من أجل المناخ، والذي تم إطلاقه من قبل دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة الشقيقة بالشراكة مع الجمهورية أندونيسيا. إن هذه الجهود الإقليمية الطموحة من المنتظر منها أن تترك بصمة واضحة في إيجاد آلية متكاملة للاستفادة من العلوم والمعارف الإقليمية والدولية لإنشاء حلول بيئية للحد من تدهور الأراضي وتعزيز عمليات الاستصلاح بشكل فعال. وفي الختام، فإن مملكة البحرين تؤمن إيماناً تاماً بتحقيق هذا النهج المبتكر والذي يوجهنا نحو تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة، وذلك انطلاقاً من إطار متكامل للتنوع الحيوي لما بعد 2020 على مبدأ أساس تشاركي تساهم به جميع الدول. وشكراً.
谢谢您的发言。现在我邀请以色列自然资源部高级副总干事内塔利普曼博士发言。在以色列之后将是马来西亚。以色列有请。
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at COP-27 last month and here again at COP-15 today, the world is racing to find solutions for the existential threats of climate change and biodiversity loss. Maintaining healthy and resilient ecosystem will secure the future of humankind and is essential for tackling climate change and for preventing pandemics as well. Thus, setting ambitious goals and measurable targets for protecting biodiversity is the key for successful GBF. For this reason, Israel supports the 30 by 30 global target and has joined the High Ambition Coalition and the Global Ocean Alliance. We will also support ambitious targets for ecosystem restoration and nature-based solutions. Israel has taken important strides since COP-15 in Kunming. For instance, we have declared 34 additional natural reserves, pushing up toward 27% of strictly protected land ecosystem. Our Open Space Restoration Fund has funded hundreds of projects around the country. This is our unique tool to funding large-scale ecological restoration financed by 1% of all state land sales. These actions include river restoration and rewilding of aquatic habitat that play a key role in strengthening Israel's bird migration paths. Israel has also been successful in encountering of business sector to adopt biodiversity consideration in their business models. In the marine environment, we have succeeded in protecting the unique Palmachim slide in the Mediterranean Sea last September. As a high-populated country, we put strong emphasis on connectivity, and just last month, we have published new master plan to protect the most threatened ecological corridor in the country. We also strongly support green and blue spaces in urban environment. Our vision is that by 2030, every municipality will have an urban nature plan, and we are already halfway there. Biodiversity crisis has reached a critical point in time. We owe nature and people a new ambition GBF. After COP-15, member states need to do everything in their power to implement it. Thank you.
谢谢您的发言。下面我邀请马来西亚自然资源、环境和气候变化部生物多样性管理司副司长海鲁尔·纳伊姆·本·阿达姆先生，在马来西亚之后将是塞舌尔。马来西亚有请。
Thank you, Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Government of Malaysia, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the governments of the People's Republic of China and Canada for organizing this important ministerial meeting. Mr. President, Malaysia's journey in achieving sustainable development has always been the national government's priority. The eradication of poverty is as important as sustaining economic growth. Hence, Malaysia has been taking comprehensive measures to ensure that the country's economic development did not come at undue sacrifice of its natural resources. As one of the 17 mega-diverse countries in the world, Malaysia has always prioritized biodiversity conservation alongside economic development. With that in mind, the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework is very important to us. We need the framework to be both ambitious and implementable. Hence, the goals and the targets that we are agreeing to here must be taking into account not only national but subnational and local circumstances. We must not forget that when we return to our respective countries, it is our responsibility to convince local stakeholders through effective mainstreaming activities. Mr. President, Excellencies, as the global community now realizes that biodiversity knows no borders, I call upon the CBD Secretariat, developed countries, private sector, and friends from all around the world to support developing countries with guidance documents, technical assistance, and adequate financial resources. I am pleased to share that efforts are underway to amend Malaysia's policy on biological diversity 2016-2025 to ensure the policy is in line with the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Malaysia is prepared to use the framework on our path to live in harmony with nature by 2050. Thank you, Mr. President.
谢谢您的发言。现在我邀请塞舌尔环境部首席秘书丹尼斯·马塔蒂肯女士发言，在塞舌尔之后将是多米尼加。塞舌尔有请。
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, Seychelles thanks the government of China for the presidency and the warm hospitality of the government of Canada for hosting us for this COP. As our time in Montreal draws to an end, we must realize that our focus is to halt and reverse global biodiversity loss to guarantee our future and that of our planet. Biodiversity is integral to our society's prosperity, well-being, and continued existence. 90% of Seychelles' GDP originating from tourism and fisheries are dependent on a healthy environment. Biodiversity loss will significantly impact our daily lives, increase our vulnerabilities, and reduce our resilience. The GBF presents an opportunity to halt and reverse biodiversity loss and to build a pathway towards achieving the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. The goals and targets of the GBF should be streamlined and clear to ensure successful implementations. Seychelles has come to this COP with the intent to adopt and provide support to this new framework. Delaying the adoption and implementation of the GBF will not only exacerbate the loss of biodiversity, but also affect our ability to thrive. Seychelles, as with other states, are at the front line and are already impacted by the adverse effect of biodiversity loss. This is why Seychelles joined the Seeds Coalition for Nature to unify our voice and to ensure that the concerns on the vulnerabilities and special circumstances of seeds are heard at the global level. As a co-lead of the coalition, we echo statements made by Samoa and Cabo Verde. We appreciate the commitment made by the friend countries to support the coalition. The Seeds Coalition for Nature will play a catalytic role to facilitate partnership between the international community and seeds and further guide support on the means of implementation for seeds. Means of implementation is of great concern to seeds. Lack of financial resources, capacity, and technological transfer are the main barriers to implementation. A fair and fast-seeing resource mobilization package must be agreed together with the GBF to ensure successful implementation. Financial flows should be from international, public, and private sources. Consideration should be given to the special circumstances and vulnerabilities of seeds when assessing these sources of funding. While parties like Seychelles commits limited national resources and pioneer innovative financing solutions, such as debt for nature swaps and blue bonds towards biodiversity, it is still not sufficient, and international funding can help reduce the financing gap. Seychelles supports the creation of a new global biodiversity fund dedicated to GBF's implementation. Seychelles recognizes the roles of biodiversity in climate change mitigation, adaptation, and disaster risk reduction. Through our national determined contribution, we commit the protection of mangroves and seagrass ecosystem. Seychelles reaffirms its commitment to the High Ambition Coalition and the Global Ocean Alliance to ensure that the 30 by 30 target is achieved. With 32.6% of our economic exclusive zone and 48.2% of our land protected, Seychelles provides the world with an evolving case study of how 30 by 30 can be implemented. Whilst we recognize that this is a global target, we do urge all parties to remain ambitious and come to an agreement to deliver on this target. We must ensure that we leave Montreal with a clear direction and a global biodiversity framework that can halt and reverse biodiversity loss. If we want to live in harmony with nature, we must also listen to the most vulnerable, work together, and be committed to achieve successful results. Thank you, Mr. President.
谢谢您的发言。秘书处告诉我，多米尼加的代表没有在现场。那我们进行下一位。我现在邀请马达加斯加环境与可持续发展部环境治理总干事拉扎芬·德贝拉里纳先生致辞，有请。
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, nous tenons à féliciter le gouvernement de la République populaire de Chine pour l'excellente organisation de cette conférence, ainsi que le gouvernement et le peuple de Canada pour son accueil chaleureux. Comme vous le savez, Madagascar abrite les 5% de la diversité biologique mondiale. Cette biodiversité est d'une importance capitale, aussi bien pour le monde que pour la population malgache, à cause de la dépendance économique et sociale qui est fortement liée. Aussi, le développement d'activités économiques durables sans porter préjudice aux ressources naturelles constituerait une option stratégique prioritaire de lutte contre la perte de la biodiversité. Nous supportons ainsi l'adoption d'un cadre mondial ambitieux post-2020, ainsi que le mainstreaming de la biodiversité dans tous les secteurs d'activité, en assurant l'immersion du secteur privé qui doit dorénavant contribuer davantage au processus de gestion durable de la biodiversité. Mesdames et Messieurs, Madagascar s'aligne à la coalition visant à protéger 30% des zones terrestres et marines de la planète d'ici 2030. Et nous sommes convaincus que cela doit aller de pair avec une stratégie efficace de développement socio-économique par le biais de la valorisation durable. Notre ambition est aussi le reverdissement de notre pays, suivant notre vision Madagascar île verte. Et notre objectif de restauration est de 4 millions d'hectares jusqu'en 2030 en tant que membre de l'AFR 100. Étant un pays très riche en biodiversité, nous entendons mettre en œuvre d'une manière effective le protocole de Nagoya sur l'accès et le partage des avantages découlant de l'utilisation des ressources génétiques. Mesdames et Messieurs, nous tenons beaucoup à la mise en place d'un fonds mondial dédié à la biodiversité qui serait nécessaire pour la mise en œuvre effective du cadre mondial de la biodiversité post-2020. La réussite de ce cadre nécessite la facilitation de l'accès au financement, le renforcement de compétences et de capacités, la promotion de partenariats win-win et le dernier, non le moindre, la reconnaissance des droits et avantages de tous les acteurs, y compris les communautés locales et le secteur privé. Ensemble, nous pouvons laisser un héritage à nos générations futures. Je vous remercie pour votre aimable attention.
谢谢您的发言。现在我邀请尼日尔国家环境促进可持续发展理事会执行秘书卡马耶马祖博士发言。在尼日尔之后将是塔吉克斯坦。尼日尔有请。
Excellences, Monsieur Steven Guilbeault, ministre de l'Environnement et du Changement climatique du Canada, Excellences, Monsieur Ngui, ministre de l'Écologie et de l'Environnement de la République populaire de Chine, président de la COP-15, Excellences, Monsieur le ministre et chef de la délégation, distingués délégués, Mesdames et Messieurs. Permettez-moi tout d'abord de saluer au nom du gouvernement de la République du Niger, le gouvernement de la République populaire de Chine de la République du Canada ainsi que le secrétariat exécutif de la Convention sur la diversité biologique pour la parfaite organisation de l'événement qui nous réunit ici. Permettez-moi également de rappeler ces mots de Martin Luther King Jr. dans son livre intitulé « Et maintenant, le chaos ou la communauté », disait en 1967, dans un autre contexte, et je cite, « Le progrès humain n'est ni automatique ni inévitable. Nous n'échapperons pas désormais au fait que demain est déjà là. Nous sommes confrontés à l'urgence aiguë du maintenant. Dans cette énigme qui se déroule devant nous en mêlant la vie et l'histoire, nous ne pouvons pas nous permettre de retard. Nous pouvons supplier le temps de suspendre son vol, mais il n'écoute aucun grief et continue sans ralentir. Au-dessus des eaux blanchies et de ruines de nombreuses civilisations, on peut lire ces mots pathétiques, trop tard. Fin de citation. C'est dire, au regard des enjeux qui nous réunissent ici, que la responsabilité qui pèse aujourd'hui sur nos épaules est immense. L'ampleur de ces enjeux et leur interdépendance nécessitent une approche transversale, dépassant le simple cadre des politiques et des actions sectorielles. Nous devons ensemble adopter des engagements ambitieux. Maintenant, car comme l'a si bien dit le secrétaire général de l'Organisation des Nations Unies, M. Antonio Guterres, à la cérémonie d'ouverture de la présente COP-15, il n'y a pas et il n'aura pas de planète B. Notre tâche est ainsi quelque peu lourde et écrasante, car nous devons prendre ici des décisions qui détermineront l'avenir de notre planète. Nous devons admettre qu'il importe d'agir rapidement et quotidiennement, notamment repenser nos modes de consommation et de production, développer le réflexe de consommer moins, mieux, revisiter nos relations avec l'environnement, avec la nature, en vue d'inverser la tendance à l'érosion de la diversité biologique. Cette partie intégrante du patrimoine naturel de l'humanité qu'il importe de protéger absolument pour les générations actuelles et futures. En somme, nous devons jeter les bases d'une planète saine, prospère, dans laquelle tous les peuples sont en mesure de vivre en harmonie avec la nature. Pourrions-nous y être à la hauteur? Le résultat de nos échanges à cette concertation nous le montrerons. Mais le Niger aimerait que nous consacrions un moment pour y réfléchir et que nous prenions de recul par rapport à la minutie des documents et des mots sur lesquels nous nous acharnons. Mesdames et messieurs, le Niger pense plus que de paroles qu'il faut des actes concrets. Et dès aujourd'hui, car le temps joue contre la diversité biologique, en somme contre nous aussi. C'est pourquoi le Niger plaide en faveur d'une collaboration internationale franche entre toutes les parties prenantes comme meilleur levier au cadre mondial pour la biodiversité pour l'après 2020. Le Niger s'aligne à ces pairs de la CEDEAO qui ont soutenu clairement la nécessité d'une réponse ambitieuse à la perte de la biodiversité lors de la COP-27 sur le climat et la COP-19 à la Sud-Est, et qui le réitère ici au Montréal. En particulier, le Niger soutient 3 objectifs majeurs sur lesquels on ne peut transiger. Protéger 30% de nos terres et de nos océans d'ici 2030, combler les déficits de financement de la biodiversité et enfin l'engagement mondial à mettre immédiatement un terme à l'extension des espèces sauvages dues à l'homme. La présente session doit prendre des décisions claires là-dessus, car nous ne devons plus attendre. Je ne peux terminer mes propos sans parler du cas de mon pays, le Niger, pour lequel les superficies couvertes par les aires protégées, les forêts classées et les zones humides classées sites Ramsar totalisent 19 522 567 hectares. représentant ainsi 20,50% de la superficie
对不
du
起，
territoire
尼
du
日尔
Niger.
代表，我必须打断你。希望你控制你的时间，谢谢。
Je puis vous assurer que les dispositions sont déjà en train d'être prises pour que, dans le cadre de transfert de compétences et de ressources dédiées à la décentralisation, les régions et les collectivités, les communes procèdent au classement et à la protection du gap pour couvrir dans un délai raisonnable. Cette initiative pertinente ne peut être réalisée sans l'appui de partenaires techniques et financiers du pays. C'est pourquoi le Niger lance un vif appel aux pays développés pour qu'ils nous écoutent, nous, le pays en développement, et nous soutiennent dans la réalisation de nos propres ambitions de protéger notre biodiversité, les services écosystémiques à long terme. Mais je vous remercie.
谢谢您的发言，谢谢您合作。下面我邀请塔吉克斯坦生物多样性公约国家联络点代表发言。接下来是中非，有请塔吉克斯坦代表。
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the government of the Republic of Tajikistan, it's a great honor for me to address the 15th Conference of the Parties of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. And taking this opportunity, I would like to thank the government of Canada for hospitality and the People's Republic of China for great organization of the conference, as well the Secretariat of the Convention on Biodiversity for usual support of parties. Tajikistan, as a mountainous landlocked country, forms about 60% of the water resources of Central Asia, and with a unique and rich biodiversity, occupies a leading position in the Central Asia region in terms of availability of genetic resources. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to address both the biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis, Tajikistan has created an extensive network of specially protected natural areas. The total area of protected areas in Tajikistan has increased from 2.8% in 1991 to 22% in 2021 of the territory of the country. Recognizing the global target to protect at least 30% of the planet's land and ocean by 2030, and taking into account the extensive protected areas capacity, Tajikistan is planning to establish the transboundary protected areas with neighboring countries and thus ensure achieving the global target. Distinguished delegates, recognizing also the Kunming Declaration, Tajikistan welcomes collaboration and coordination actions with ongoing multilateral environmental agreements and the biodiversity-related conventions to promote the nexus of biodiversity with other thematic areas that are critical for conservation, loss and damage, resource mobilization, and livelihood of local people. Tajikistan believes that post-2020 global biodiversity framework's ambitious plans will implement broad-based action to bring about a transformation in society's relationship with biodiversity, ensuring that by 2050 the shared vision of living in harmony with nature is fulfilled. As soon as the global biodiversity framework is adopted, the issue of resource mobilization will be the core issue, and of course, without the necessary resources like finance, capacity building, and technology transfer, the achievement of the assigned task can take many years. Therefore, for many developing countries and countries with economies in transition, the proactive assistance of the international community is in great demand. Excellencies, given the national circumstances, Tajikistan would like to urge for more focus on resource mobilization, enhanced accessibility, and clear delivery plan for biodiversity financing, and accelerate the progress towards the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development for the countries with economies in transition. Thank you very much.
谢谢您的发言。下边我邀请中非共和国代表团团长发言。中非之后是几内亚。中非共和国有请。
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Permettez-moi d'abord de présenter mes gratitudes au gouvernement du Canada pour l'hospitalité accordée à l'ensemble des délégations présentes à la COP-15 et adresser en même temps mes sincères félicitations à la présidence chinoise pour l'organisation de la COP. Je voudrais aussi saisir cette occasion pour vous transmettre les vœux du président de la République centrafricaine et de l'ensemble du gouvernement pour l'adoption d'un cadre mondial biodiversité post-2020 ambitieux. Monsieur le Président, nous sommes appelés aujourd'hui à mettre fin à l'érosion de la biodiversité. Malgré les tensions géopolitiques et économiques actuelles, il est urgent que nous parvenions à un accord ambitieux permettant de stopper l'érosion de la biodiversité. Située en plein cœur du continent africain, avec une superficie de 623 000 km², la République centrafricaine compte environ 5 millions de population. Le pays présente des caractéristiques naturelles et climatiques offrant une diversité biologique riche, avec 7 écosystèmes majeurs, à savoir les systèmes aquatiques, les îles, les montagnes, les forêts, les savanes, les zones humides et les systèmes agricoles. Ces systèmes caractérisés par une diversité biologique riche et quantitative comprennent plus de 5 000 espèces de flore, dont environ 3 600 connues, 208 espèces de mammifères, 698 espèces d'oiseaux, pour ne citer que cela. Bien que disposant d'un environnement viable et de ressources naturelles sur lesquelles elle compte se développer, la biodiversité en République centrafricaine ne cesse de s'effondrer. Et pour lutter contre le recul de cette biodiversité et faire face aux problèmes de déforestation et de dégradation des terres, la République centrafricaine s'est fixé un objectif ambitieux, celui de restaurer 1 million d'hectares de terres dégradées et déboisées à l'horizon 2020 et 3,5 millions d'hectares à l'horizon 2030. Cet engagement constitue une contribution en faveur du défi de Bonn de restaurer les terres dégradées et déboisées et les superficies de 150 millions d'hectares d'ici à 2020 et 350 millions d'hectares d'ici 2030 à travers le monde. La RCA s'est dotée de 18 aires protégées, parmi lesquelles 6 parcs nationaux de catégorie, 11 réserves de faune et 2 sites Ramsar ayant une superficie totale de 376 300 hectares, 12 zones synégétiques, 6 domaines fauniques. Autre effort fourni par la RCA, c'est l'adoption en 2020 de la loi portant interdiction, production et importation des emballages plastiques en République centrafricaine, permettant de limiter la pollution plastique, facteur de perturbation des habitats, en agissant comme moyen de transport pour les espèces non indigènes. Il y a aussi la reconnaissance des droits des peuples autochtones à travers la ratification de la Convention 169 de l'OIT sur les droits des peuples autochtones. La RCA a aussi élaboré un cadre réglementaire sur l'accès et le partage des avantages issus des ressources génétiques. Nous pensons que la mise en œuvre du cadre mondial biodiversité nécessitera des ressources supplémentaires. C'est pourquoi nous soutenons la position africaine portant sur la création d'un fonds spécial dédié à la biodiversité et l'adoption parallèlement au cadre d'une stratégie de mobilisation des ressources. Mesdames et messieurs, il nous reste quelques jours pour la clôture de la COP-15. Afin de stopper et d'inverser ce déclin, il faut que le cadre mondial de la biodiversité soit similaire à l'accord de Paris sur les changements climatiques en termes d'importance et d'impact. Enfin, la République centrafricaine s'engage à vivre en harmonie avec la nature d'ici 2050 et s'engage aussi à faire un effort urgent et sans précédent de protection de ces milieux naturels au cours de la prochaine décennie. Je vous remercie.
Merci. 谢谢您的发言。现在我邀请几内亚生物多样性公约国家联络点代表发言。几内亚之后是牙买加。几内亚有请。
Monsieur le Président de la COP-15 sur la diversité biologique, Mesdames et Messieurs, distingués invités, la Guinée tient tout d'abord à remercier le secrétariat exécutif de la Convention pour l'organisation de cette 15e conférence des parties sur la diversité biologique et félicite vivement le Canada pour l'avoir abrité et la Chine d'en assurer la présidence. Nous sommes honorés de participer à cette réunion clé pour l'adoption du cadre mondial pour la biodiversité post-2020 et est persuadé que la COP-15 sera un moment important pour inverser la tendance inquiétante de perte de la biodiversité mondiale. En effet, en Guinée, les services fournis par les écosystèmes sont essentiels pour les moyens de subsistance des populations guinéennes et d'Afrique de l'Ouest, notamment pour l'alimentation, l'approvisionnement en eau douce de la région, en produits forestiers non lignés, ainsi que la protection des populations des zones côtières contre les inondations. La Guinée souhaite s'engager fermement dans les objectifs du cadre mondial pour la biodiversité post-2020. Ainsi, elle s'engage dans le cadre de l'objectif de protection de 30% des zones marines et terrestres d'ici 2030, dans l'extension et la consolidation de son réseau d'aires protégées à travers la création de 17 parcs nationaux terrestres, marins et côtiers, complétés par une série de réserves naturelles. Ce nouveau réseau sera basé à la fois sur les aires protégées historiques du pays et sur les différentes évaluations réalisées avec ses partenaires sur l'importance écologique et la contribution à l'adoption et à l'atténuation du changement climatique des zones stratégiques. Ce réseau représentatif des écosystèmes guinéens aura comme objectif le maintien du capital naturel de la Guinée et de leurs services écosystémiques essentiels pour les populations, mais également au développement d'emplois verts dans les phases d'aménagement et de gestion de ces réseaux d'aires protégées. Ce processus lancé au cours de la COP-15 sera réalisé en collaboration avec les partenaires techniques et financiers du pays. Les bases de la gestion d'un tel réseau sont en cours de consolidation avec la création officielle de l'Office guinéen des parcs nationaux et réserves de faune et d'une fondation pour le financement durable du réseau. Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs, le gouvernement guinéen, conformément à la vision de son Excellence le Président de la Transition, colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, s'engage dans la mise en œuvre du cadre mondial pour la biodiversité post-2020 en faveur de la préservation de la biodiversité, afin de créer un cadre environnement favorable au bien-être et à l'épanouissement des populations vulnérables. Vive les conventions de Rio, vive la coopération internationale. Je vous remercie.
感谢您的发言。我现在邀请牙买加驻加拿大高级专员萨朗米勒女士发言，有请。
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I express our gratitude to the governments of China and Canada for organizing and hosting this COP. The Kunming Declaration provides a strong basis for the international community to achieve consensus and take ambitious steps towards a shared future for all life on Earth. With limited time to achieve global climate targets, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals, urgent, enhanced, and accelerated action is required to strengthen ecosystems' resilience in SIDS such as Jamaica. Jamaica is currently implementing a combination of measures aimed at halting and reversing biodiversity loss, including increasing its terrestrial, inland waters, as well as coastal and marine areas under legal protection. Ecosystems restoration, particularly mangrove forest and seagrass beds, invasive alien species management, and mainstreaming the sustainable ocean and blue economies. Over the last 2 years, the government of Jamaica has declared 3 new land and seascapes as protected areas. These new designations have increased the country's terrestrial and marine protected areas network to 25% and 14% respectively. The new protected areas are the Cockpit Country Protected Area, approximately 78,000 hectares, the Black River protected areas, which includes the Black River Lower Morass, Jamaica's first wetland designated under the Ramsar Convention, Pedro Keys and surrounding waters, main habitat for the queen conch. In the current year, the Cabinet will be asked to approve the designation of 17 ecological and biologically sensitive areas. These designations will support Jamaica's commitment to the 30 by 30 target as a member of the High Ambition Coalition for People and Nature and the Global Ocean Alliance. In keeping with the United Nations Decade of Ecosystems Restoration, a number of ecosystems restoration projects are currently being undertaken, namely, restoration of approximately 0.12 hectare of mangrove forests along the roadway in the Palisados Port Royal protected area, restoration of 57.1 hectares of the mangrove wetland at Winds Morass, Trelawney, and at the inland bog within the Mesa River protected area, restoration of approximately 1,600 hectares of wetland area in southern Clarendon, and approximately 20 hectares of wetland within the Mason River protected area. The government of Jamaica is committed to ensuring the development, adoption, and implementation of an effective post-2020 global biodiversity framework that includes the provision of necessary means of implementation in line with the Convention to reverse any identified loss of biodiversity and ensure that biodiversity is on a path to recovery by 2030 and towards the full realization of the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. Mr. President, Jamaica remains committed to play her part in realizing this global vision. I thank you.
谢谢您的发言。下面有请吉尔吉斯斯坦的代表发言，有请。请把麦克风给吉尔吉斯斯坦。有吗？有吗？没有的话，我们现在下边的时间留给听取国际组织的意见。首先，我邀请太平洋区域环境组织秘书处总干事。
Dear ladies and gentlemen.
Tell him not to touch.
Dear ladies and gentlemen.
是吉尔吉斯斯坦是吗 ？OK， 请讲。
Yes. Dear Chairman and dear Head of Delegation, I am glad to be here today representing the Kyrgyz Republic in the 15th Conference of the Parties UN Convention on Biological Diversity. With 94% of territory covered by the mountains of the Kyrgyz Republic, shown leadership making the efforts for raise awareness about the mountains regions and its recognized their uniqueness. Kyrgyzstan countries advocate the position of the mountains countries before the international community. In this context, until 2030, we are expected to make a series of political decisions, increase scientific research, public actions, and financial investment. Kyrgyzstan launched the national campaign Jashil Muras with the framework of the International Year Sustainable Mountain Development and the Year of the Protection Mountain Ecosystems and the Climate Resilience. According to the plan, Kyrgyzstan will plant 5 million annually throughout the country and implement programs of vulnerable sectors of such agriculture, energy, implement the programs of vulnerable sectors. The country plans to host the Bishkek 25 Global Summit in 2027. We propose the development of adaptation special targets program on the mountain ecosystem under the UN. I appeal to the international community to support this initiative, to accelerate the support mountain countries and international fund of the protection mountain ecosystem. Given this context, our country strongly committed the above-mentioned initiative. Good example is the Aspen Declaration, New Impulse for the Mountain, where the Kyrgyz Republic proposed the 5-year action plan for the development of the mountain regions. Dear head of delegations, protection of the noble snow leopard from the exciting has been of the few successful international initiatives. Let me remind you that in 2013 and 2017, our country held the global forums of the conservation of snow leopards and mountain ecosystem. This year, Kyrgyzstan hosted the 7th meeting of the Steering Committee on the Global Snow Leopard Ecosystem Protection Program, representative environment ministers from the 12 range countries. Recently, the UN General Assembly supported our initiative and adopted the resolution, Nature No Borders, which among the issues noted the importance of multilateral cooperation for the effective implementation of the UN Convention of Biological Diversity. Dear participants, our country prioritized the protection of special nature areas and habitats that the home of many animals, plants listed in the Red Book. We also recognize the value of ethical, inclusive, and just conservation efforts involving local communities. The Kashkasu Statement of the Global Biodiversity Conservation issued by the world-leading conservationists in the small village of the Kyrgyz Republic. In conclusion, in my speech, I would like to reiterate that the Kyrgyz Republic is open, active international cooperation because on belief that we can preserve the biodiversity of our planet and achieve the desired sustainable development in harmony with the environment only through the joint efforts. Thank you for the attention.
谢谢您的发言。下面我们听取国际组织的意见。我强烈的提醒大家控制好时间，3分钟。首先，我请太平洋区域环境组织秘书处总干事塞法尼亚·纳瓦德拉先生发言，有请。
Thank you, COP President. All protocols observed. Let me start by wishing everyone who's still here a warm Pacific welcome from the sunny Pacific. I thank the People's Republic of China and Canada for your wonderful hosting of this much-awaited COP-15. 2023 will mark the 30th anniversary our 30th anniversary as the Pacific Island region's Intergovernmental Environment Organization. We continue to work according to the mandate given to us by our 26 member states, including 21 Pacific Island, small island developing states, 14 of whom are state parties to the CBD. Our mandate is to promote cooperation in the Pacific region and provide assistance in order to protect and improve its environment and to ensure sustainable development for present and future generations. Our vision as an organization is that we continue to have a Pacific environment that is sustaining our livelihoods and natural heritage in harmony with our cultures. Our Pacific Island leaders this year declared the Pacific Islands a region of ocean that we consider our blue Pacific continent that is larger than the combined land area of Canada, China, and the USA, as an area under a state of climate emergency. We also face the other twin crises highlighted by the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration. We are drowning under a sea of waste, and our island environments and ecosystems are under pressure from habitat destruction and species loss, or species that are under threat. Island ecosystems have the dubious distinction of having the highest rate of extinctions globally. We have assisted our members to prepare for COP-15, and they have come here with 4 Pacific priorities. The first is to adopt an effective and coherent global biodiversity framework. I look forward to this becoming a reality at the end of this COP. The recognition that the Pacific Islands region faces unique biodiversity conservation and management issues due to our geographic isolation, limited land areas, and vast ocean spaces. In other words, the special case for SIDS. We need investments in capacity to manage and monitor biodiversity, especially the human actions impacting island biodiversity. Our 4th priority is that healthy ocean biodiversity should be a global priority. Unfortunately, we are still weighted too much towards terrestrial biodiversity. We should respect those countries that only have a lot of ocean biodiversity and give it the same weighting. Our region is ready to implement the Global Biodiversity Framework, and our Secretariat commits to facilitate implementation by integrating it within existing regional implementation mechanisms. The 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent, approved by our leaders in July this year, is the framework for sustainable development within our region up to 2050. And through the thematic pillars of climate change, ocean, and environment, we will implement the GBF. We have already approved the framework for nature conservation and protected areas in the Pacific region, 2021 to 2025. That is our regional strategy for biodiversity conservation in the Pacific. It was endorsed by almost 2,000 participants at our 10th Pacific Island Conference on Nature Conservation and Protected Areas in 2020, and approved by the members of the SPREP Governing Council at their 2021 meeting. We have integrated what we anticipated would be in the Global Biodiversity Framework, and will revise once it's adopted to fully integrate it within our regional framework. We utilize the Pacific Islands Roundtable for Nature Conservation, a coalition of our state members, nature conservation and development organizations, intergovernmental organizations, and donor agencies created to increase effective conservation action in the Pacific Islands region in 1998 as the coordinating body for implementation, not only for our regional framework, but also for the Global Biodiversity Framework. This body is currently chaired by the BirdLife International, so we fully integrate NGOs within our governance mechanisms. As its Secretariat, we urge our parties to strengthen implementation of the Nouméa Convention, the Pacific's Regional Seas Convention. We will assist our members to revise their NBSAPs to integrate national actions to implement the Global Biodiversity Framework. We will continue to build the capacity and assist our members with implementation. We will work with our donors and member states to develop and implement effective projects and programs to implement the Global Biodiversity Framework. Finally, I wish to thank our members, especially Australia, France, and New Zealand, for their extra budgetary project and technical support, and those that partner and fund our work in biodiversity conservation, including the Global Environment Facility, the European Union, UNEP, the Pew Charitable Trust, and the CURE Initiative. I thank you for your attention.
谢谢您的发言。现在我邀请欧洲复兴开发银行副行长兼首席风险官安妮玛丽·斯特拉霍夫女士发言，有请。
Thank you very much to the CBD and the government of China for inviting me to speak today at the high-level segment of this COP. Last year in Glasgow, multilateral development banks, including the EBRD, issued a joint statement on nature, people and planet. We did this because we were painfully aware of the climate and biodiversity interrelated crisis the world is suffering. Climate change accelerates biodiversity loss, and healthy ecosystems offer affordable solutions to tackle climate change. And the protection and sustainable management of our natural capital should provide fair livelihoods for all. We need to firmly act on both crises and act quickly. In our statement, we committed to further mainstream nature in our operations, focusing on 5 areas. Firstly, by showing MDB leadership on the subject, including in the update of our policies. Secondly, by scaling up nature-positive investments. Thirdly, by fostering regional synergies to achieve systemic impacts. Fourthly, by valuing nature to guide decision-making. And finally, through improving available biodiversity data. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the EBRD, due to its region of operations and its private sector mandate, has long focused on the upgrade of depleted environmental infrastructure and the recovery of degraded ecosystems. Inspired by this multilateral momentum, we have taken action on all the areas previously mentioned in coordination with other IFIs. As announced at COP-27, MDBs will focus on biodiversity and nature in a joint working group. I would like to highlight 3 initiatives. First, we are developing a joint MDB positive taxonomy for nature to accelerate and better track investments. Second, we are developing a natural capital valuation model and launched a nature risk assessment pilot. Third, together with the European Investment Bank and the Union for the Mediterranean, we launched a Blue Mediterranean Partnership during COP27 to help reverse ecosystem degradation in the Mediterranean and in the Red Seas. To conclude, we need to scale up nature-positive investments and expand our focus from projects to systemic impacts. And we need to help create effective market mechanisms which recognize biodiversity benefits and help reorient capital flows. The path ahead of us is complex, but the destination is clear. We must halt biodiversity loss and reverse trends as soon as possible. We need to take full advantage of the Montreal momentum. Nature, people, and the planet deserve no less. Thank you.
谢谢您的发言。接下来发言的是阿拉伯国家联盟的代表，然后是国境捕鲸委员会和非洲开发银行。首先，请阿拉伯国家联盟的代表发言，有请。
شكرا سيد الرئيس. في البداية أتوجه بالشكر لحكومتي الصين وكندا وكذا سكرتارية الاتفاقية. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، السيدات والسادة، إنني أشارك معكم اليوم ممثلا لجامعة الدول العربية ومتحدثا باسم الأمانة الفنية لمجلس الوزراء العربي المسؤولين عن شؤون البيئة، ذلك الكيان الذي يمثل الآلية العربية الإقليمية المعتمدة في إطار منظومة جامعة الدول العربية للتنسيق والتعاون في كافة مجالات البيئة والتنمية المستدامة. السيدات والسادة، إننا ندرك في جامعة الدول العربية ومجلس الوزراء العربي المسؤولين عن شؤون البيئة أن تراجع خدمات النظم الإيكولوجية نتيجة الخسائر المستمرة في الموارد الطبيعية وتدهور الأراضي يقوض المساعي التي تبذلها المنطقة وقدراتها على تحقيق الأمن الغذائي. من هنا فإننا نؤمن بأن التعاون والتنسيق بين كافة الشركاء الدوليين لإصلاح النظم الإيكولوجية يمثل فرصة فريدة من نوعها لتوحيد الجهود المبذولة من جميع الأطراف المعنية من أجل وقف تدهور النظم الإيكولوجية وتعزيز عملية الإصلاح باستهداف النظم الإيكولوجية المتدهورة في العالم. وانطلاقا من الأهمية التي نوليها لكافة الموضوعات المتعلقة بالشأن البيئي وإدراكا للمسؤولية التشاركية لكافة دول العالم في حماية البيئة، فقد قمنا بالعديد من الإجراءات التي تشمل العمل على تأسيس الاتحاد العربي للمحميات الطبيعية في إطار منظومة العمل العربي المشترك لجامعة الدول العربية، ومتابعة تنفيذ البعد البيئي من أهداف التنمية المستدامة بالتعاون والتنسيق مع المنظمات العربية المتخصصة والمنظمات الإقليمية. كما إننا نتطلع إلى الخروج باتفاق على إطار عالمي لما بعد 2020 يعمل على حفظ التنوع البيولوجي واستخدام مكوناته بصفة مستدامة، والتقاسم العادل والمنصف للمنافع الناشئة عن الموارد الجينية بطرق تتيح الوصول إلى التكنولوجيات الملائمة للدول النامية، وتوفير التمويل المناسب بما يساعد على تنفيذ أهداف القضاء على الفقر وتحقيق الأمن الغذائي. وشكرا لكم.
谢谢您的发言。下面有请国际捕鲸委员会的代表发言，有请。
Thank you, Chair. The International Whaling Commission recently celebrated its 75th anniversary, which makes us one of the oldest biodiversity-related conventions in this room. On behalf of our 88 members, we've been pleased to join with our biodiversity partners over the past few years in negotiating the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Mr. Chair, whales and other cetaceans are a key part of the global ecosystem, adding to the productivity of the environment. In fact, science shows that whales, large whales, act as ecosystem engineers and add to the carbon sequestration of the oceans and become part of nature's solution to climate change. Indeed, the present value of carbon sequestration of one whale during its lifetime, along with its other contributions to the economy, is estimated by the International Monetary Fund to be as high as $2 million US. Now, the IWC's scientific and conservation committees are the global epicenter of cetacean expertise, and at the direction of our commission, they conduct research on ecosystem contributions of cetaceans and a wide array of other topics. Commercial whaling remains under a global moratorium. However, the IWC continues to review the sustainability of harvest limits for aboriginal subsistence whaling. But today's threats to cetacean populations are no longer from direct harvest, but rather from the unintended impacts of other human activities, such as fishing, shipping, plastics, and other pollution, and climate change. This means that considerable collaboration is needed, and we are grateful to our colleagues at the FAO, the IMO, the SPREP, the biodiversity MEAs for support. Conservation and stewardship of marine mammals is challenging even when we have perfect information about the species and its threats and the solutions. And this is sadly the case for the vaquita in the Gulf of California and the North Atlantic right whale off the east coast of North America. But on a more positive note, the IWC offers perhaps the strongest proof that late action can still be successful with collaboration and commitment. And the best of several examples is the slow but steady recovery of blue whales in the Antarctic from the brink of extinction. Mr. Chair, the IWC's work program for science and stewardship is in line with the targets and goals of the GBF, and we stand ready to work with our partners in rising to the challenge. Thank you, Chair.
谢谢您的发言。在非洲开发银行发言之后呢，将有保护国际基金会、大自然保护协会和欧洲环保协会。首先，请非洲开发银行的代表发言。
Mr. President, Excellencies, I would like to start by thanking the host country, the People's Republic of China, Canada, and the Convention on Biological Diversity for inviting the African Development Bank to take part in this very important conference at a time when nature is in crisis. I bring greetings from the African Development Bank Group and express our fervent desire that this COP-15 delivers on its set objectives and that we can implement a post-2020 global diversity framework in a manner that ensures equity, fairness, and sustainable use of natural resources for development. An ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework gives us the opportunity to innovate and break out of silos through nature-based approaches to preserve biodiversity and nature, which sustain our communities and economies. It is also the best way to improve the livelihoods of millions of pastoralists, farmers, fishermen, young people, and women across the Sahel, the Horn of Africa, the Congo Basin, and our marine and coastal areas. The concessional arm of the African Development Bank Group, the African Development Fund, through its 16th replenishment, has just mobilized an $1 billion.
They're trying to fix it. No.
Has just mobilized an unprecedented $8.9 billion for Africa's low-income and fragile states, which depend on the fund, including a new climate action window of $429 million. One of the important commitments under this replenishment is to support African countries in generating country-specific knowledge, capacity building, and mobilizing resources towards biodiversity and natural capital finance. As Africa's premier development finance institution, the African Development Bank is set to lead on the biodiversity agenda on the continent by mainstreaming biodiversity in our investments and operations and exploring new and innovative financing solutions to support implementation of the global biodiversity framework on the ground in Africa. If there was ever a group that can shape success and deliver on preserving the world's biological diversity, it is all of us in this room today. So let us rise to this noble challenge. Let's find the resources and start integrating the value of nature in our economies, financial systems, and policies to create shared economic prosperity. Let us leave the past behind and focus on a more sustainable economic development path that accounts for people, climate, and nature. Thank you very much.
谢谢您的发言。现在我邀请保护国际基金会的代表发言，有请。
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. This has been a year of conferences. At each event, one thing is abundantly clear. The energy transition is well underway. There's no longer a question of if, it's a matter of how quickly. And this is good news, of course. But right now, we cannot say the same about the nature-positive transition. I am gravely concerned about species loss and its long and short-term consequence for jobs, economies, and the fabric of life on our planet. But there is one thing that lifts my spirit, the ambition that I've seen among you here. We cannot let that momentum go to waste. We must leave Montreal with bold targets and financing at hand. To be clear, Goal setting is not the easy part, though. Targets are not the end game. Target will not pull us back from the brink. That requires vision, leadership, and capital. The biggest challenge before us is closing the biodiversity funding gap. Whether number you pick, it's enormous. Our war on nature has gone on for a long time now, but success is more within our reach than not. First, because eliminating subsidies will go a long way to move us from activities that deplete and destroy and towards those that replenish and restore. This is what fueled the transition to a nature-positive economy. Second, because we are living in a golden age of science. Every day, there are new technologies, new insights that help multiply the return on every dollar invested in nature. For example, Conservation International scientists recently found that 3/4 of the world's irrevocable carbon, the carbon that we cannot lose, and 91% of the terrestrial vertebrates can be found on just 14% of Earthland. This gives us a fighting chance if we prioritize them. Because indigenous people and local communities have kept much of what we will need still relatively intact through their stewardship, there is no excuse for delaying actions another 2 years. We have the tools, we have the expertise, and we know exactly which places are the most important for biodiversity, climate, and human well-being. And we have the models to sustainably finance our efforts. There is no one else coming to save us. This is it. We are it. And if we simply wait for a change to arrive, it will never come. But if we can lead with courage and curiosity, if we can temporarily forsake convenience and convention, and then with conviction, then a giant leap forward is possible. Today, thank you, Mr. Chair.
谢谢您的发言。现在我邀请大自然保护协会代表发言，有请。请把麦克风给大自然保护协会。哦。
Microphone to TNC. TNC. TNC is the abbreviation. TNC is the abbreviation.
就是那个 TNC， 然后让他们找他们。
麦克风。大自然保护协会 TNC， 麦克风好了吗？我们这样，我们先进行下一个，然后待会儿看看回来再请大自然保护协会发言。请欧洲环保协会代表发言。
Yeah. We'll come back. We'll come back to them.
"欧洲环保协会，请把麦克风给欧洲环保协会。It's not work.
The next is Client Earth. We can call Client Earth.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back to TNC.
Already called. Kristen already called.
现在可以了吗？
Can he call again client Earth?
就是他意思就是说，请主席能不能再叫一次欧洲环保协会？
刚才叫了。
对，是叫了。
欧洲环保协会在招手，他目前麦克风不工作。
Yeah.
Client
microphone doesn't work. Oh,
Okay.
both.
Can you tell the technicians to please?
That's the next one.
It's done? Okay. Excellencies, ministers, ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues and I at TNC have heard so many stories of hope and change over the past few days. Indigenous communities across Canada reclaiming their traditions and their future, countries such as Haiti who are making outstanding efforts to support their protected areas despite daunting economic conditions, youth clamoring for a future in which the natural world is respected and conserved and continues to provide physical and spiritual sustenance to them and their children. Businesses sincerely trying to understand biodiversity and work to reduce their impacts and be transparent about their dependence on nature. This conference cannot let them down. Efforts of these individuals, communities, and enterprises are inspiring and needed, but they are not enough. They must be supported by the collective actions of the international community, by a global agreement of the entire community of nations committing themselves to economic and social transformation. That is what will bring real change, and that is what is needed to heal the natural world. The negotiation of a global biodiversity framework was always going to present a challenge. We are grateful for the perseverance of parties to continue deliberations despite the pandemic challenges and delays, to start this hard work online with extra meetings and to kickstart essential discussions. The willingness of many countries to find new and additional biodiversity finance during these times of unrest and economic uncertainty, including the announcements made yesterday, have also been very heartening. A transformational agreement is within our grasp, an agreement that sets us on a pathway to halt and reverse nature loss through clear and specific actions. Actions that transform our food systems to be resilient and sustainable, that reduce harm from all of our industrial sectors, that protect 30% of all natural ecosystems, that support the rights of Indigenous people to manage their territories and resources sustainably, and that support the climate mitigation and adaptation needs by using nature. And, of course, actions that generate the resources and a transformed mindset to get all of these things done. The Nature Conservancy stands ready to work in partnership with parties and with all stakeholders to apply the expertise of our 4,000 scientists and conservationists around the world to find pathways to implement this convention fully. Together, we can achieve a nature-positive world. Thank you.
克莱恩斯欧洲环保协会。
下面有请克莱恩斯欧洲环保协会的代表发言。你的麦克风可以工作了吧？
It's client Earth.
Yeah, it's client Earth. That's true.
Anyone? Hello? Finally.
Okay, but he just
So thank you, Minister Zhao, my friend. Dear Excellencies, I might look like a white guy, but actually I've lived and worked in China for the last 20 years, and I've been supporting the biodiversity negotiations since 2018. Amazing progress has been made, and so I want to thank all of you for your hard work. We are on the cusp of a historic moment for the planet. And in the final stage, I think maybe what's most needed really is a bit of trust in each other. And especially the presidency, China, is probably going to play an important role. So where are we at? We've heard calls for 30 by 30, and the presidency gets that. We've heard calls for much more resource mobilization and solidarity with developing countries, and the presidency gets that. We've heard calls for an effective implementation mechanism, and the presidency gets that.
We've heard calls for corporate disclosure, and the presidency gets that. We've heard calls to recognize the link between climate and biodiversity, and the presidency gets that. And we've heard calls to respect indigenous people's rights and local communities, and the presidency gets that too. I know the presidency wants the GBF to be not just ambitious, but for it to be really achieved by 2030. When I say work in China on environmental issues, people often say, oh my God, that must be so difficult. Actually, it's not, because there is a very strong political commitment in China for the environment. China didn't wait for the GBF to be finalized. In fact, transformative change is well underway in China already. China has hammered on illegal wildlife trade, causing stocks of ivory, rhino horns, and pangolin scales to pile up in transit countries. China has established more than 2,000 environmental courts, and prosecutors have been bringing thousands of cases for the environment against local governments, against companies that harm the environment. China is already effectively conserving, protecting 31% of its land in the ecological conservation red lines. At the same time, great strides have been made in development, and so China is showing that conservation and development can go hand in hand. And the Chinese government has asked Planet Earth to help developing policies to control mitigation, to mitigate deforestation risk in China's soft commodity supply chains. That could be a major boost for biodiversity conservation and climate change in the world. So, ministers, negotiators, in the final days, please place some trust in one another. Please come together. Planet Earth will play its role in the implementation of the GBF using the power of the law. Thank you all for getting this over the line on behalf of Planet Earth, on behalf of myself, and on behalf of my daughters, Lisa and Linda. Thank you.
谢谢德布尔先生，感谢你的发言。下面发言的有阿瓦兹组织、国际可持续发展研究所和国际奥委会。首先，我邀请阿瓦兹组织的代表发言，有请。
Thank you. My name is Bert Wander, and I'm the acting CEO of Avaz, a campaigning community of millions of people from all over the world. Avaz means voice or song, and I'm speaking today to deliver more than 3 million citizens' voices from all over the world who are part of Avaz's campaign to put half the earth under protection by 2030. But I'm also speaking to you today on behalf of all the non-human voices that aren't heard at political negotiations like this. I'm speaking on behalf of the last Kauai O'o, whose song rained down from a treetop at sunset, calling for a mate who would never come. I'm speaking on behalf of Spix's macaw, the western black rhino, the golden toad, all torn from the great tapestry of life, wiped out by a single species of bald ape that emerged from East Africa just 200,000 years ago. Humans, us. And if we are the cause, we can stop it. Today, 1 million species are clinging on in the face of extinction. Birds and plants and animals whose fate is being decided here, decided now, decided by you. If they could speak, they'd tell us that the earth doesn't belong to us. They'd say that we belong to the earth. They'd tell us that everything we do to the earth, we do to ourselves. That their fate is our fate. That is the wisdom at the heart of many of our longest surviving cultures. And it is wisdom that we desperately need. Because the truth is, we aren't here to protect nature. We are nature, trying to protect itself. And for all the hard work and the rare successes we've seen, species by lost species, habitat by lost habitat, to date, we have failed. But here, now, You have a chance to begin to turn this round. To miss it would be unforgivable, but to take it would be historic. That means protecting half the Earth by 2030. It means making sure the money is there to pay for it. It means real protections and direct funding for indigenous people and local communities based on respect, humility, and partnership. To succeed, we must all be prepared to compromise. Not to do what is easy, but to do what is necessary in the face of this extinction crisis. You have all the public support you need. 3,298,135 Avaz members from almost every country on this beautiful earth urging you to end the destruction of the web of life. They are urging you to do it together, and they're urging you to do it now. Thank you.
谢谢您的发言。下面我邀请国际可持续发展研究所所长兼首席执行官理查德·弗勒里佐内博士发言，有请。
Thank you. Excellencies, esteemed colleagues, let me join others in thanking the People's Republic of China as president of the CBD Conference of the Parties and as host of the second part of COP-15 Canada for the opportunity to contribute to this high-level segment. Here in Montreal, on the traditional territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka and a gathering place for many First Nations, we've heard repeatedly about the dire need for immediate, decisive action to conserve biodiversity, sustainably use it, and ensure fair and equitable sharing of its benefits. My organization, the International Institute for Sustainable Development, or IISD, joins governments and other partners in committing to the successful and rapid implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework that we hope will be concluded this weekend, the GBF. How will we achieve that rapid implementation? I would like to focus on 3 points: transparency, financing, and nature-positive climate solutions. First, transparency. Through ISD's Earth Negotiations Bulletin and Global Communications Network, we'll continue to ensure that CBD parties and civil society have timely access to the latest information and analysis on the negotiations. Transparency is crucial so that everyone from developing countries to indigenous peoples and local communities can shape the final outcome, but also, of course, that we can all hold each other to account. Second is finance. Now, as we prepare for the GBF's implementation, we face some sobering financial estimates. New UNEP data confirms that the level of finance going towards nature-based solutions must increase threefold by 2030, a very significant number. Some of this investment must go to nature-based infrastructure projects, which are often more cost-effective and beneficial than traditionally engineered infrastructure. At ISD, we have a nature-based infrastructure global resource center that is working with the GEF and UNIDO on new approaches to drive greater investment in these nature-based solutions and these infrastructure projects in over 40 countries over the next 3 years. We also in finance must tackle harmful subsidies in line with the GBF's draft Target 18. This year, WTO members took a great step in the right direction with the new Fisheries Subsidies Agreement, but we need to do more. Simply put, we need to stop putting money in things we don't want and put that money towards things that we do. Finally, I want to talk about nature-positive climate solutions. At ISD, we are directly supporting over 50 developing countries through our NAP Global Network to help them develop their NAPs, or National Adaptation Plans. We're home to the Nature for Climate Adaptation Initiative, where we're providing a space for those people working on nature-positive solutions to climate change, whether in the context of their national adaptation plans or local projects and communities. Again, we need to invest in nature for its own good, but also recognizing that there are so many co-benefits to nature-based solutions that can not just improve biodiversity, but can have an impact on climate mitigation and make our communities more resilient to climate change. Wherever we land this weekend, whatever emerges from COP-15, addressing the global biodiversity crisis and securing a nature-positive future requires our collective ambition and our collective action. ISD looks forward to working with all of you to take on this challenge with our partners to build a world where people and planet thrive. Thank you.
谢谢您的发言。我想提醒大家，秘书处让我提醒大家，在各位发言前要按下麦克风按钮，按一下，以便技术团队能找到你。下面邀请国际奥林匹克委员会代表发言，有请。
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the hosts, and thank you to everyone who is still here with us this evening. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I'm honored to be speaking to you on behalf of the International Olympic Committee and the broader sport community represented by the Olympic movement. We know biodiversity is the foundation of all life on Earth, and its loss threatens the future of all humanity, and sport, too, is affected by it. Whether it's on the mountains, on the water, in the cities, sport depends on nature, the clean air and the water it provides. We recognize that sport has an impact on nature, but sport can also play an important role in protecting it. That is why here at COP-15, the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, together with the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the UN Environment Program, and the Convention on Biological Diversity has launched the Sport for Nature framework. The framework's aim is to rally the sport community to deliver nature-positive action by 2030, committing to 4 goals. First, protecting and avoiding damage to natural habitats and species. Second, taking specific positive action to restore and regenerate nature in and around environments where sport operates. Third, reducing risks to nature and enabling opportunities to conserve and restore it within its supply chains. And fourth, educating and inspiring greater awareness and action for nature within the sport and wider communities. The framework provides a process for measurement and reporting. And this commitment is not new. It builds on the success of the United Nations Sport for Climate Action Framework, co-launched in 2018 by UN Climate Change and the IOC. Recognizing the intrinsic role of nature-based solutions in addressing climate change, it complements this work. It also builds on the IOC's own efforts to address the climate and biodiversity crisis, reducing emissions in line with the Paris Agreement, prioritizing existing infrastructure for Olympic Games, and creating an Olympic forest to help restore degraded land in Mali and Senegal. The United Nations 2030 Agenda recognizes sport as an important enabler of sustainable development, and we are keen to support the post-2022 Global Biodiversity Framework as part of the whole-of-society approach that is so urgently needed. Learning to overcome challenges is one of the skills we learn through sport. Sport also teaches us that we can only overcome those challenges by working as a team. The challenge facing our planet requires each one of us in every sector to embrace that lesson and work together. And the Olympic movement, its over 80 recognized member sport federations, 206 Olympic committees, tens of thousands of athletes around the world, is committed to working with all of you as part of this team together. Thank you.
谢谢您的发言。接下来的3位发言者是来自中非森林委员会、国际商会和国际鸟盟的代表。首先有请中非森林委员会的代表发言。
Monsieur le Président, distingués délégués, Mesdames et Messieurs, permettez-moi avant toute chose d'exprimer ma sincère gratitude aux autorités chinoises et canadiennes pour l'organisation réussie de cette COP-15 à Montréal. Qu'il me soit également permis, en ma qualité de président en exercice du Conseil des ministres de la Commission des forêts d'Afrique centrale, de dire toute l'importance que notre institution accorde à la Convention sur la diversité biologique dont la mise en œuvre est cruciale pour une planète saine et durable, ainsi que pour les générations à venir. Aussi, nous félicitons les parties pour le niveau élevé d'ambition du cadre mondial pour la biodiversité, dont l'implémentation effective permettra à l'humanité de vivre en harmonie avec la nature. Mesdames et messieurs, l'espace COMIFAC abrite les forêts du bassin du Congo qui sont parmi les plus denses et les plus riches au monde en termes de biodiversité et qui séquestrent par ailleurs 600 millions de tonnes de CO2 de plus qu'elles n'en émettent par an. Les pays de l'espace COMIFAC ont réalisé d'importants progrès dans la mise en œuvre de la Convention sur la diversité biologique, notamment en matière de conservation de biodiversité, avec la création de plusieurs aires protégées. Le réseau sous-régional compte 206 aires protégées, toutes catégories confondues, soit 15% des terres et 5% de la zone économique exclusive marine des pays d'Afrique centrale. À ce jour, nous enregistrons 24 millions d'hectares de forêts aménagées, dont plus de 5 millions d'hectares certifiés suivant des standards de gestion responsables. C'est le lieu pour moi de réitérer notre profonde gratitude à nos partenaires techniques et financiers qui nous accompagnent dans cette importante mission. En vue de soutenir la mise en œuvre du cadre mondial pour la biodiversité, les pays de la COMIFAC entendent mener des actions ci-après. Promouvoir la bonne gouvernance, la gestion durable et la préservation des forêts, ainsi que la conservation de la biodiversité, tout en veillant au respect des droits des peuples autochtones et communautés locales. Renforcer les capacités opérationnelles des agences nationales de gestion des aires protégées, élaborer et mettre en œuvre des politiques et législations en matière d'accès aux ressources génétiques et partage juste et équitable des avantages qui découlent de leur utilisation. Les pays de la COMIFAC entendent souligner ici la nécessité de la mise en œuvre au bénéfice des États des mesures d'accompagnement prévues par les dispositions des alinéas 3 et 4 de l'article 20 de la Convention pour la diversité biologique. Il relève également l'urgence de renforcer les capacités de diverses catégories d'acteurs, les peuples autochtones, les jeunes, les femmes, les organisations de la société civile au niveau local. En définitive, nous encourageons les parties à adopter le cadre mondial pour la biodiversité post-2020 et à définir clairement les moyens pour soutenir sa mise en œuvre à travers notamment la création d'un fonds spécial dédié à la conservation et la gestion durable de la biodiversité. Je vous remercie.
谢谢您的发言。下面有请国际商会发言，有请。
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, on behalf of the International Chamber of Commerce and our network of 45 million companies in 170 countries, we express our deepest appreciation to the COP-15 President and the People's Republic of China for their leadership, to the Government of Canada for its hospitality, and to the CBD Secretariat for its work to prepare this meeting. We are at a pivotal point in history for the future of humanity and our planet. The science is clear, and the magnitude of the consequences of inaction even clearer. And the will and signals from business and other stakeholders to engage have never been stronger. COP-15 must demonstrate that governments are prepared to work together to address the biodiversity crisis at the speed and the scale needed to reverse nature loss. Multilateral collaboration and coherence across global environmental and sustainable development agendas are crucial to address global challenges and also to drive national implementation of solutions needed to transform economic and financial systems and to align public and private sector action and investments. Businesses from around the world have demonstrated here in Montreal that they are already taking action to integrate biodiversity into their strategies, operations, innovations, and investments. They are ready and willing to work with other stakeholders and to harness their skills, expertise, innovative capacity, investments, and influence to contribute to halting and reversing biodiversity loss. But to do this, business needs and has unequivocally called for an effective and ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework. This should provide clear pathways for business action supported by the necessary tools and coordinated government policies that enable, incentivize, and accelerate positive outcomes in business operations and throughout value chains. The framework should also promote increased transparency and disclosure against universally accepted frameworks through clear and balanced reporting requirements that reflect business realities. Business is also calling for simple, workable, and legally certain outcomes from the DSI discussions that will support and accelerate the research and innovation efforts in all countries, which will be crucial to achieve biodiversity and other sustainable development goals. We look to you to lead in identifying points of convergence to move towards an international consensus. Only this will secure this historic opportunity to develop a global agreement that rallies all actors in the collective challenge of halting and reversing nature loss, including setting the direction for game-changing business action. Thank you.
谢谢您的发言。接下来有请国际鸟盟发言，有请。
Thanks, Mr. President, Excellencies, dear delegates. As the UN Secretary General stated at the opening of COP-15, humanity has become a weapon of mass extinction. We know this from painful experience. 1 in 8 bird species are now threatened with extinction, such as the culturally significant Antipodean albatross, a cultural tauna for Maori, a species whose population is being decimated by poor practices in fisheries across the Pacific. The biodiversity apocalypse is being felt now, on the ground. In lockstep with the climate crisis, this threatens to undermine the very fabric of our society, our future, our survival. The 119 civil society partner organizations that make the BirdLife family around the world have been on the front line working to save species from the brink of extinction, hand in hand with local communities and indigenous people and supporting willing governments. Whether it is bringing back the Alagoas and wren back from extinction in Brazil, or working hand in hand with governments and communities in the Great Green Wall in Nigeria and Liberia, just to cite a couple of examples, our partners around the world know that we need an ambitious global biodiversity framework with clear and measurable targets and a very strong commitment to implementation right away with significant funding. It is time to forge a peace plan with nature. It is time to reconcile our relationship with the planet. We need to remember that less than 1% of the global GDP is needed to protect 30% of the lands and seas of the planet. We just need strong political will. We need you. We need strong commitments on reducing the drivers of biodiversity loss alongside with a robust set of enabling conditions that will provide the groundwork for a transformational change. These include a mission which truly reflects our collective ambition to halt and reverse biodiversity loss to be nature positive by 2030. The full integration of a human rights-based approach which recognizes and actively delivers the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. The agreement of a global target to protect and conserve at least 30% of the world's land and ocean by 2030, which fully acknowledges the rights and stewardship role of indigenous peoples and local communities. The funding on the table now to kickstart implementation with a sustained increase in these funds alongside the elimination of subsidies harmful to nature to close the funding gap for biodiversity. These must be backed by a strong implementation mechanism without which we risk to repeat the failure of Aichi. Humanity may create huge challenges, but with collective determination and strong political will, we can also reverse them. We are looking to you, ministers assembled here in Montreal, for your leadership, for the leadership of an ambitious nation collective nations who have committed to act in accordance with the scale of the crisis at hand, an ambition which has sadly not been apparent over the last 2 weeks. The world is watching. We, over 119 partners, over 11 million members, we are watching. The momentum from all sectors of civil society, from indigenous groups to financial institutions, is currently outstripping the momentum in the negotiations. In the margins of these discussions, where you are looking to compromise, we're asking you to be bold, to make history, to help us, yourselves, our future, to have a horizon. We need nothing less than transformative change. Don't be caught on the wrong side of history. We must act for nature, act for biodiversity, act for humanity. We're in your hands.
谢谢您的发言。接下来的3位发言者是来自未来地球组织、国际野生生物保护学会和绿色和平。首先有请未来地球组织的代表发言。
Thank you, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen. The biodiversity and climate crises are being driven by the same anthropogenic drivers. Solutions are within reach if we tackle both in tandem, working towards a just and equitable world. Last month's climate COP-27 created momentum, with climate decisions mentioning biodiversity and with a breakthrough finance mechanism for loss and damage. Ambitious goals for biodiversity can only be achieved through urgent transformative action that encompasses solutions across the social, economic, and political spectrum. Our organization, Future Earth, convenes researchers across the globe from a range of disciplines to co-produce knowledge with a diversity of stakeholders. We are uniquely placed to support the Convention on Biological Diversity and parties in implementing a post-2020 global biodiversity framework by providing the necessary research that brings about transformation. Let us name some examples. The science briefs developed by Biodiscovery in collaboration with Geobon have provided parties with an updated assessment and recommendations for selected targets on how to achieve the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. The Global Mountain Biodiversity Assessments Mountain Portal provides accessible, up-to-date information on the state of biodiversity in the mountain regions of our planet. 10 Facts on Land, developed by the Global Land Programme, explain the challenges of achieving sustainability in land use as a guide for policymakers and practitioners. In our Canada Hub, we are working to elevate Indigenous knowledge systems around nature stewardship. Lastly, the Earth Commission assesses the latest science to define safe and just Earth system boundaries for people and planet, supporting the development of science-based targets for Earth systems such as land, water, biodiversity, and others. An Earth Commission scientific study on achieving a nature-positive and people-positive future, published in the journal One Earth as the COP started, re-emphasized what many have been stating throughout the last 3 years. Based on the paper, with partners, we initiated a global online call for signatories that as of 9:30 p.m. in Montreal on 16th December, now has almost 3,300 signatories from researchers and scientists from over 125 countries. The number increases every hour, which we will report daily as the COP approaches its final hours. The science is clear. We reiterate the global call for governments to act immediately to halt and reverse biodiversity loss. This will require real ambition in the agreed 2030 targets in 3 critical areas. To halt and begin to reverse loss of ecosystems, species, and genetic diversity and invest in measures that effectively put them on paths to recovery. To reduce direct and indirect drivers of biodiversity loss to sustainable levels across all major production and consumption sectors. Achieving this will require wealthy countries and sectors of society to rapidly reduce their shares and impacts of consumption to achieve a more equitable distribution. Without all 3 of these actions, we cannot halt and reverse biodiversity loss. Future Earth commits to continue its long-standing collaboration with the Convention on Biological Diversity, providing interdisciplinary research in support of a post-2020 global biodiversity framework. We support a framework that describes clear, measurable, and ambitious goals to catalyze corresponding action from all sectors of society across all targets. Thank you.
谢谢您的发言。下面要邀请国际野生生物保护学会的代表发言，有请。
Thank you, Chair. The Wildlife Conservation Society would like to extend our gratitude to China as the COP presidency and to Canada as co-host of COP-15 for bringing us together for these critical negotiations. I am proud to be speaking on behalf of my WCS colleagues from across 60 countries who have been providing the science and expertise for the Global Biodiversity Framework and who have been involved in the negotiations for close to 4 years. On behalf of WCS, we have 3 messages. First, that the science is clear, that the 3 existential crises and interrelated crises of our day, the collapse of biodiversity, climate change, and the persistent threat of pandemics of zoonotic origin, all result from a degradation and destruction of nature. Our first responsibility, therefore, must be to prevent further degradation and loss of ecological integrity, particularly in our most highly intact and biodiversity terrestrial and marine ecosystems. Ambitious actions outlined in the conservation targets of the GBF are a precondition for halting and reversing biodiversity loss and achieving an equitable, prosperous and sustainable future. We urge you to adopt such a GBF. Fortunately, our second message is that we have proven tools to reverse biodiversity loss. For example, protected and conserved areas, when designed and managed equitably with indigenous peoples and local communities, are demonstrably effective in addressing all 3 crises. We should build on these successes, including adopting a target to protect and conserve at least 30% of land and oceans by 2030. This effort must, of course, be complemented by other policy actions to redirect harmful incentives, to transform our food systems, and to radically increase global support to countries and communities that do most for global biodiversity, yet suffer the most from our collective impacts. Our final message is that an ambitious framework presents an extraordinary opportunity to restore our broken relationship with nature. COP-15 could be the catalyst for a renaissance of nature, one that secures lives and economies, prevents the pathogen spillovers that could and likely will lead to future pandemics of zoonotic origin, stabilizes local and global climate systems, and provides agency and security for peoples and cultures who have built interdependent relationships with biodiversity that we must learn from. Let us be emboldened by what we could achieve. It is within our power to transform the trajectory of nature, but incremental political and financial commitments will fail the planet. Half measures will not deliver half the solution. Our response must be commensurate to the threats we face. If you, the parties, and ourselves do not truly commit to change our abusive relationship with nature here in Montreal, we will all be judged harshly by future generations, and rightly so. Thank you.
谢谢您的发言。下面有请绿色和平的代表发言，有请。
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm honored to speak on behalf of Greenpeace and the millions of people who support Greenpeace. We are at a crucial moment for the future of life on Earth. You, here, will decide if it is a turning point. Deforestation, overfishing, mega-farming, and unchecked extraction of natural resources are driving the disappearance of species and biodiversity at a rate that is unprecedented in human history. Between climate change and ecosystem loss, 1 million species are now threatened by extinction. But the discussions here have been painfully slow. This pedestrianism stands in great contrast to the level of ambition and action the crisis demands. We must put Indigenous rights front and center. Evidence from every continent consistently shows that Indigenous peoples are the most capable and responsible stewards of biodiversity. It is no surprise that 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity is concentrated in Indigenous territories, which cover just 1/5 of land and coastal marine areas globally. We hope that parties here are not simply paying lip service to the inclusion of Indigenous rights and to the recognition of their roles in traditional knowledge, but that you will cement it in the new GBF. We need ambitious nature protection targets. Scientists have clearly told us what is needed to make sure we can sustain healthy ecosystems on this planet. The high seas, especially, are hugely exposed. Only 1% is effectively protected. Without a network of highly and fully protected marine areas covering at least 30% of the world's oceans by 2030, it will be impossible to sustain the web of life. But real ambition is more than a number, and we call on blue leaders and all of you who have committed to making these areas highly and fully protected to be true to your rhetoric here in Montreal. And to make this all real, we can't leave without concrete plans to implement the GBF as soon as possible. We are facing a biodiversity finance gap of around $700 billion. We must shift subsidies and investments away from industries that destroy nature, but that alone cannot satisfy the resource and capacity building needs of many countries. Majority world delegates should not have to return home from yet another COP without real funding commitments from the global north. Fair and equitable treatment is just a slogan unless it is underpinned by the guarantee of sufficient resources. The natural world has many languages of its own. It cannot speak to us in ours, but it is speaking to us nonetheless. And we must listen. We must find the will to make this moment a true turning point for nature. I thank you.
谢谢您的发言。接下来将是我们今天现场发言的最后3位，他们是来自加拿大公园和荒野协会魁北克分会、世界资源研究所，还有怡可城地方可持续发展协会。首先，请加拿大公园和荒野协会魁北克分会代表发言，有请。
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je suis ici pour représenter la société civile québécoise qui a agi au cours des derniers mois pour se réunir avec plus de 100 organisations, organiser plus de 60 événements dans le cadre de la COP-15 et nous avons saisi la balle au bond de l'appel criant du GIEC et de l'IPBES qui ont appelé à des changements systémiques importants, des changements dans notre modèle économique et aussi des changements dans notre système de valeurs. La société civile québécoise, réunie sous le nom de Collectif COP-15, a organisé une grande conférence internationale sur les solutions aux causes sous-jacentes responsables du déclin de la biodiversité, des causes sous-jacentes qui sont également responsables de la crise climatique. Nous avions 2 objectifs durant cette conférence. D'abord, ouvrir le dialogue, un dialogue difficile sur comment on fait pour changer le monde, comment on fait pour changer le modèle économique, comment on fait pour apporter des changements au système de valeurs. Et je pense qu'on a réussi à ouvrir ce dialogue-là. Le deuxième objectif était de lancer un message pour que toutes les prochaines COP, climat et biodiversité confondus, qu'il n'y ait plus jamais une COP sans qu'on adresse cet enjeu-là des causes sous-jacentes responsables du déclin de la biodiversité. Et il n'y a rien de mieux qu'un objet de notre enfance pour essayer de comprendre l'enjeu des changements systémiques et de la limite, des limites terrestres. Tout le monde sait que si je continue à souffler dans ce ballon, les limites physiques du ballon vont faire en sorte qu'il va exploser. C'est la même chose pour les ressources sur la Terre. On doit trouver une façon de trouver la bonne taille de notre économie. On doit trouver une façon de faire fonctionner notre économie pour qu'elle soit stable. Et il est urgent de s'occuper de cet enjeu. Si on ne réussit pas à s'occuper de l'enjeu de la croissance économique et du changement de modèle économique, ça pourrait aller dans toutes les directions. Merci beaucoup.
谢谢您的发言。秘书处告诉我，世界资源研究所的代表没在他的位置上。世界资源研究所，你在吗？ 如果没有的话，我们进行现场发言的最后一项，请李可成地方可持续发展协会的代表发言，有请。
Your Excellencies, ICLEI, as a network of over 2,500 committed cities and subnational governments, has worked closely with the CBD Secretariat and parties since COP-8 to engage cities and subnational governments in COP processes and platforms, providing an enabling environment for collective action for vibrant cities where people and nature can thrive in harmony. We know that if we do not restore peace with nature now, also in the context of our shared urban future, irreversible tipping points will cause irreparable damage to the critical ecosystems that sustain all life on Earth. No city can afford to undervalue or take nature for granted, nor make decisions that are not nature positive. The readiness to act is demonstrated by political and technical leaders of 237 cities from 69 countries who participated in the 7th Summit for Subnational Governments and Cities at COP-15 in this room, which represents an historic global mobilization of local governments supporting the CBD parties, as was evident in the live-streamed summit in our first ever subnational government and cities pavilion, which together showcase best practices and innovation from cities and provinces around the world. We thank the Government of Quebec, our main sponsor of the 7th Summit and Pavilion, Montreal and Kunming, Yunnan Province, the CBD Secretariat, Regions 4 and UNEP, our main partners at COP15. We also witnessed at least 36 new cities and several new partners, including the World Health Organization, joining Cities with Nature as a global initiative, which already sees over 200 individual local commitments on its new action platform. Several launches and announcements took place here at COP15, indicating raised ambition and a sense of urgency, such as the new Berlin Urban Nature Pact, linked to Cities with Nature, which also supports the Singapore's Cities Biodiversity Index, now available in more languages than ever before. Cities' ambition and pivotal implementation roles are recognized in various texts in the Global Biodiversity Framework and reflected well in item 16b, which are still being negotiated by the parties. Please adopt these. I thank the Scottish Government for their leadership in the Edinburgh process. ICLEI is proud to be among the first to sign the Edinburgh Declaration and remains a core partner in this process. The strength of cities is our ability to deliver action locally, and actions are best delivered when we collaborate. Together, we can support the parties significantly in achieving global biodiversity targets, thereby ensuring a nature-positive future for all, also in our cities, where more than half of humanity already resides. Thank you.
谢谢您的发言。到目前为止，今晚我们所有的现场发言已经全部结束。由于我们的翻译呢只能工作到晚上10点，因此我们这个会议必须要10点结束。很不幸呢，我们今天就没有更多的时间播放视频发言了。不过呢，大家的视频发言将作为会议记录的一部分，我们会请秘书处将大家的视频发言上传到公约网站上。感谢各位代表的发言，也感谢各位代表的理解和支持。明天上午10点，我们将举行高级别会议的闭幕式，简要总结高级别会议发言的要点。再次感谢各位代表的发言，祝大家度过一个愉快的夜晚。谢谢大家。